So I've been willing to make this tutorial for quite some time now, and apparently now it's the time for it. I've been testing, I have been experimenting, I have been doing things, and I'm also been searching for things, and came across certain ideas, concepts, scripts, whatever you wanna call it, that I haven't found, at least not on YouTube, and at least maybe not without too many mistakes, which is always quite funny. Finding scripts, finding things that in the end are not quite working, but very often you're finding things that are working. So I want to do it a bit quicker. I think that a lot of tutorials are quite long, and so I'm speeding through it and probably gonna answer things if necessary in the comments or so. So it's basically about VDB fracturing, which I think is quite interesting since you can make interesting compositions, I'd say, while also being able to then use those fractures or those elements to give them materials and render them in somewhat of a nice way without having to worry that they do not fit together. Let's call it like that. So I do actually want to start with a simple cube here. And there's probably a lot of nodes that you do not need, but yeah, period. The trail was just for the pop network. By the way, if you want to have it only once generated, then $FF equals 1 just starts this animation or the pop network once. So when you're having, for example, as I'm doing it here, I'm using the whole geometry to distort it. I'm not getting like a billion of these geometries, which can be quite slow, at least for me, but you're only having one, and this one is being distorted over the course of this simulation, basically. And then you can trail it, and it's going to have a different effect on it compared to when you're using multiple ones. Then I'm giving it normals because I had to, and transforming it in some or the other way, which isn't too interesting now. It's basically making it longer just because it's a fucking cube. And then we're VDBing it, and then converting it again for some reason, and then VDBing it again. I think it was because in the top of the script, it was quite needed for me to get the effect that I wanted to have. But basically, we are VDBing it, and I'm subtracting it with something random that I actually do not really want to have here. And then I'm segmenting it by connectivity to get rid of smaller details. I maybe should... I think that I'm gonna try to give it like less points to make sure that maybe I'm not getting rid of the whole geometry. Maybe it's just 2 or something. Yeah, there we go. So in case there were like smaller fractures there or smaller parts there, they would be deleted by having it segment by connectivity, when you then can see the colors that you, by the way, could also turn off and on. And then blasting everything but the surface 0, which is in, I guess, most cases the red one, and so delete non-selected. But now we're getting into the interesting thing, or to the interesting thing, the fracture. What is quite interesting here is that I'm seeing it doesn't do anything, which is amazing. So maybe I have to do something to it. Might just be, might actually be too big. Yeah, there we go. Which is definitely an amazing result, this little tiny shit here. It should probably be smaller or something. And as you can see, and probably even smaller, yeah, there we go. We're having one geometry, and we are able to distort it or turn it into 2, and it's still one thing, so basically one group, and you can work with it like one geometry basically. What is unfortunately not really working is, at least for me, and I haven't figured it out yet, choosing one of them, so blasting one of them away or deleting one of them, and further processing the other one using like VDB reshape or something like that, which is a bit of a bummer, but theoretically speaking, you could just turn them back into polygons and then VDBing them again and so on and so forth. So then I'm converting them because I just need those this early fracture, and then we're subdividing it because I am then measuring the curvature, which for some reason in the newer version isn't like really working, and I do not actually know why. It just gives me like some just gives me some random, maybe it's about, yeah, might be about this. And yeah, as you can see, I'm measuring the curvature of it to just see, okay, where it's concave, where it's convex, and whatever. And you can then choose this attributes of convexity and concavity to build groups, first of all, and then also assign attributes and things to those groups. We're unwrapping it because I need it for the further process, and then figure out with convexity is bigger than 0.1 or something, or it might actually also be concavity, where those parts are, because I do want to give, and I don't actually know why it's being shown in this way, but I don't really care now. I think you can best see it then. You can see it then, yeah, definitely. When I'm getting rid of it. Well, maybe someone in the comments can tell me like why it's showing this. I can also sometimes escape and or enter or something does help, but not in this case. But when I'm really being it from polygons again, you can see I have distorted only the edges. Which is interesting because it gives the geometry like a very purposeful distortion. Of course, and by the way, what is happening, you are, it's kind of a bummer that, I'm sorry, kind of a bummer that we can't see it too good now, but when I zoom in, you can see it. So I'm basically assigning an attribute map, an image, so to speak, to okay, yeah, there's a file, to only the edges. And then I'm using the edges or those color values to displace them by a normal, to distort them via the image. So basically mapping the image onto the geometry and then using the image to make geometry, which can actually be quite interesting when you're having interesting images. And so you can turn them into something like this. Of course, there's way more interesting ways to do that, way more interesting, how should I say, textures to use. But it's just a very easy way to distort geometry in a sensical way, because maybe the edges are rounder, maybe they are rougher, or in general, those concave bits, maybe there needs to be some vegetation growth, and therefore it is just rougher or more porous or whatever. Then we are fracturing it again. And I do want to point out, this is not like some script to use, but it's just ideas to also incorporate into whatever you're doing. And so we are fracturing it again, but now we decide to use a loop to go over every single one of those VDBs. Because what is interesting that is happening when you're using a reshape and erode it or dilate it, you can also turn it into dilate, sorry, that it is moving with it, as you can see. So those two pieces of VDB, there is a relation in between them. So it's not overlapping, but it's basically pushing it further away, as far as I can at least understand it. And therefore, when you're oopsie, I was not breaking anything. stop it. So when you're using close as well, can be quite interesting effects or open or something to just have more of a, I think it's called shadow edge, Schattenfuge, I don't know. Anyways, just making it clearer that there is a separation between those elements. Yeah, by the way, this VDB fracture over here also needs a VDB as a second input as a cutting object. I think it makes sense to also create this cutting object in a CAD software or something like this. I'm very often using just some, yeah, there you can see fracture. I'm very often just using some kind of distorted other geometry just because it's easier to deal with. Then we're fracturing it, and then we're using this loop to go over angles, every single one of them. And of course, there's a multitude of different ways in which you could process every single one of them. And then I'm reshaping it because, and this is now applied to the whole thing. But which is interesting is that with this analysis, which is basically also analyzing the curvature of one VDB, so the initial VDB, which I'm then using as a mask, as an alpha mask. So whatever I'm reshaping here is just also gonna be like this curvature. For example, when I'm getting rid of this, should give me nothing because I'm not having a mask here, but I could also just do it like this. Yes, there's something completely different happening. And sometimes just really interesting effects that you can achieve by, I don't actually know what's happening with the other ones. Might also be interesting, let's see. Yeah, not much happening, but might be interesting to go over other nodes, so to speak. And then I'm converting them back to VDBs. And now, which is interesting, getting back those colors. I would be aware and not choose to export the curvature colors because they can fuck up things. You might be able to get rid of them. I haven't looked into it, like deleting this attribute. But here you can see it rather nicely that we're distorting this geometry via the image or the colors of the image. And I think, by the way, the whiter or the brighter the color, the more distortion there's going to be, which you can probably also do in some other way, like inverting it or just really choosing which color is going to offset or displace the geometry in which way and whatever. Then we are also transferring, I think, the original. Let's actually see what we're doing here. Now I've clicked something and fucked everything up probably. Oh. Okay. Yes, the name. So basically the initial fractures. So not those ones, those are just for show basically. Which in the end I'm always choosing the same one. So the initial fracture is the same as the second fracture. But I'm then transferring those attributes back to the original one to then have the original fractures, basically, if it makes sense or not. And what is now interesting is that we can choose a material and just give it to this certain part of the geometry. So this part over there is gonna have a different color or different material than the rest of it. And also this one's gonna have a different color, which just can create some really interesting geometries or compositions, I would say. And of course, might also be interesting to then blur them. So blurring the colors basically, which you can see, you can could also just do this and this, I think, or is it uppercase P? I never know. Yeah, it's an uppercase P. Just doing maybe something like this. Maybe this is interesting. I don't know. Depends on the usage. Something else that you can do, because now we are distorting via normals basically by color. But you could also do something like this. It's actually quite a bummer. Really quite a bummer. We're basically having this CD value being promoted from a point attribute to primitive attribute. And then we're using set extrusion is CD in a wrangle, which we then can use in a poly extrude node to extrude. Let's have a look at the VDB. Actually, sometimes I'm having those things, sometimes I'm not having those things. But what essentially it is doing, we've created our own distance scale, which is under local control, which is then the C extrusion. So we're basically extruding by color, which might also be interesting for some other things. And I guess if you're mapping things in the correct way or in a good way, then you're going to have some really interesting effects, especially also when you are, for example, using, by the way, which I also didn't know, you can, you can't see that. When you right click on a node, you can do save and texture UV to image. And what might be interesting then is using this UV image and distorting it. For example, giving it a color and or mapping some other, maybe using AI, mapping another image onto it. Because then you're having the initial geometry from here, and you can then also distort it via the point warp again, which just gives it a more, I would say, clear distortion in terms of you're really mapping it onto the geometry, and you probably can also see better what is going to happen and control it better. So this is one thing, and another thing that for me is really interesting and might fuck things up. So we're probably gonna do this. Is the solver. I might be linking the original video down in the description if, in case I do not forget about it. But what is basically happening here is we are creating a dynamic mask, a VDB mask, and we are then distorting it. And I hope it's not dying here. So it probably isn't the best geometry to show it. But what is happening is something like this. So initially it should be like some icicle growth script, basically, let's say. What is happening is we are inserting a normal geometry. On one hand, we're having this VDB from polygons. And also this combine is relevant, and then the reshape. And in the reshape, we are once again having like a mask. And then we are combining it, which is also irrelevant. Whatever I tried there. What we're doing basically apparently is we're setting, I don't actually know what is happening, by the way. Yeah? We're having two vectors, but I'm showing you all of the necessary panels so that you can do it too. Then we're doing this. By the way, this is very essential that you're also getting these attributes from the surface to the VDB then. And we're doing this, and then we are doing that. And as you can see, we're already having some sort of an distortion happening. Then we're using this volume warp with a noise and a curl noise, and we're putting it into the output again. So this, and then the wrangle that is, I think, basically choosing with this, as you can see, the mask. You're basically choosing on the mask with this slider. And what I had to do is blasting away one of those volumes, because if I didn't do so, I would have two. Well, as you can see, I just want to have the mask basically. And then you could also actually transform it using this node, make it smaller or bigger or whatever, to just give a different effect or actually a different growth onto the geometry. And we're actually getting, let's see, I think you can see it. Sometimes it's actually kind of working? There we go. So when we are playing it, we should see, okay. There's interestingly enough, oh no. Sometimes it is working inside of the solver, and sometimes it is not. So most often I just have to get out of this window and then have a look at it from here. There we go. Yeah. So it is, in this case, since the mask is over the whole geometry, we are also distorting it in every single direction. What the initial script was basically actually doing is having something like, I think -1 is going to give me something like what I've been searching for. Yeah, it's just the lower part of the whole of the whole volume basically, or everything that's -c basically. So the bottom part of everything. And then using this to drive a vector or a distortion, a movement of all of those points, of all of those, let's say, vertices, towards the bottom. And that's basically it. But it can give you really interesting, also really interesting things to then also use this fracture thing and whatever. Yeah, I think this is it. This is what I wanted to get out there. I do hope that I haven't forgotten about anything, but I think that's basically it. By the way, I mean, you can see, I think I've clicked onto everything, I hope at least, but this attribute map, I've used this group also to have it onto, it's actually really a bummer that we can't see it. This group, which is also the same one that is grouping the concavity / the convexity of the things. Let's actually see what is happening, just quickly, since it's now a new geometry. Might be interesting to see, unless everything breaks, and or we just can't see anything. That's also a viable option here, apparently. But the thing also is that those color values, and this is also why I'm transferring them later on, at least I haven't been able to do so, but also having this color value in the VDB, so storing it there so that I do not have to transfer it later on. I think it is possible. But if you're just giving it, well, I haven't been able to do so, period. Long story short, I haven't been able to do so yet. But I don't think that I want to do this now. No. And there on the other side, there is maybe something that I will go into later on, which is basically the section script that I've had or that I've been using for a while, which is basically, again, which is interesting. You can do VDB subtract. Let's have a look into this quickly or so, maybe. I hope. See, it's loading. Don't know. You can't see it, I think. It's just below the screen, basically. Quickly want to show you this because VDB is actually quite interesting. I didn't know that they are so interesting, actually. Yeah. So this is basically big chicken wing or so. Yeah, anyways. So in the subtract, there is multiple different things that you can operate. For example, multiply, which is multiplying this other geometry to this. What is actually also interesting is maximum and minimum. So we're having this left input being maximum as big as the other one, which can really be interesting for layers, which can be really interesting for also having floors inside of a building. So it's whatever floor you're going to have, it's just going to be as big as like this outer shell, for example. and then also the minimum, which is also gonna include both. And then there is different subtractions and whatever one could be playing around with. But yeah, that is quite it, I think. Gonna see you the next time. I hope I've been able to go over everything. If there's anything unclear, please leave a comment or whatnot, or text me on Instagram or something. See you.